welcome to another edition of Montpelier Connection. I'm State Representative Mike Mrowicki from the Windham 4 District of Putney, Dummerston, Westminster. We have concluded the 2019 legislative session, and this is another series of interviews we're doing with local legislators to share the work we did. It was a very productive session. We got a lot done, and I'm pleased today to have Representative Sara Coffey here.
It's great to be here, Mike.
You represent the Guilford-Vernon district.
Windham 1.
Windham 1. So this was your first year. How did it go?
It was really, I have to say, it's every day that I walked up to the State House, it is just an enormous honor to be walking in and serving in the People's House.
Yeah.
And it was amazing to feel the people and to see the process. And I feel really optimistic, and I'm really grateful to be living in Vermont, and especially with all that's going on in Washington, D.C. right now. I feel that the work and the way we're working in our state is in sharp contrast. So I hope we get to talk about that and other things.
I agree. Whenever I leave the state now, I call it a Vermont appreciation trip. And I'm very grateful to be living here in Vermont and doing this work. You know, you mentioned the building, and every time I see the building, the State House, I still get a little flutter inside, and it's still like that, and I hope it always is, because it's an honor to be able to do this work, to represent our friends and neighbors, and to, in some ways, lead the nation, as we have in several instances, and we're continuing to try and do that.
And with our form of civil discourse in the way.
You bet. Now, in the House, we're assigned to one committee generally, and then there are other pieces we do sometimes off session. And you were on the Corrections and Institution Committee this year. Can you tell the people a little bit about the charge of that committee?
Absolutely. And
how it works, and what kind of things you look at there?
So House Institutions and Corrections is both a money committee and a policy committee, and I love saying that because we as a committee, we deal with the capital bill, which is our state's 2-year capital budget, and I can talk a lot about that. It's the dollars that we work with the state treasurer, and the amount of money that we can bond for each year, and it's for that funding is for our infrastructure projects, from our state buildings to our clean water infrastructure, clean water fund. Many of the institutions, like with the Agency of Human Services, our various institutions like Woodside, our correctional facilities, our state parks and forests. And it's not just the buildings, but it's also the policy that goes behind, that funding. So it's been an incredible committee to serve on because of the number of agencies that come into my committee. So as a freshman legislator, it's really an honor to be serving on that committee. And we do most of our, as you know, in the House, all of the money bills start in the House, and then they cross over to the Senate in early March. And then we turn in our committee to corrections policy. So there's a lot going on in that realm. Some of the big topics I hope we can unpack a little bit.
Sure,
but we passed a Earned Good Time bill. We're looking at how we can replace our aging correctional facilities. We're looking at how we can support folks to have productive people who are in our facilities are going to be re-entering into our communities. So through education and programming and everything down to getting it easy to get your driver's license and your social security card, so that you can return and being a productive member of our society. And we heard a lot about the MAT, which is medication-assisted treatment that's available outside our correctional facilities and inside our correctional facilities. So we got pretty deep into some of those issues. And one of the things that that I'm really proud about that we passed in the capital bill that relates to corrections is that we're funds to engage in Justice Reinvestment Act 2, and we can talk a little bit about that.
Sure.
So it's a fascinating committee to be. I feel like budgets are an expression of our priorities, and
values.
And this year we really emphasized and put our money into clean water, into education, into history and community, our community building grants, and our state's infrastructure, and a lot of it that focus on supporting our Agency of Human Services. So I feel really proud about the work that we did, and as you know, our capital bill is a 2-year budget, and so when we return in January, we'll do what's called a budget adjustment to see how the money was or wasn't spent, and make adjustments.
Yeah. Well, this is part of the evidence to why I feel like you were such an important new member to our delegation. You've jumped right in with both feet and obviously taken grasp of a lot of complex issues. And sometimes complex is another term for confusing.
Yes.
But
well,
you're right there, and it's been a pleasure to work with you on.
Well, thanks, Mike. And we have a great, not to blow our own horn, but we have a really wonderful delegation, and I feel like it's a team.
It's a team.
It's a team, and having such a strong team really helps us support us in our work. And
so, you mentioned before justice reinvestment. Now, in 2007, I believe, was Justice Reinvestment Part 1. At the time, we had a prison population that was rising fast, and I believe the projection was that by 2020 we were going to have over 2,000 inmates in Vermont prisons.
Yeah.
So we started affecting a lot of the things that we'd heard worked around in other parts of the country, alternatives to prison, treatment programs and we turned that around. Can you share more about?
Sure. So justice reinvestment was a process that involved the 3 branches of government, so the executive, legislative, and judicial branches, and working together with CSG, the Council on State Governments, to look at where we're going. And as you said, it was in 2007, and we were looking at a real increase in our prison population. And so, it's expensive to house people in our correctional facilities, depending on where they are. It's anywhere from $50,000 to $70,000 a year. And so while some of these decisions are driven by money, I feel like my decisions are driven, I'm a pragmatist, but also I feel like where are our values? How can we be doing this better? So the results of the work that was done, it was a wonderful cross-disciplinary collaboration, and to make some, to divert people from our correctional facilities, and through those savings, invest in things like, that's when our community justice centers were set up in the state of Vermont.
Yeah.
And in the news we've been hearing a lot about how many folks we have in our correctional facilities, and we have people out of state in Mississippi. And I think as a value in Vermont, we want to bring those people home, even though it is less expensive. If we were a different state, we would keep those people out of state because it's less expensive. But in Vermont, the other thing that folks may or may not know is that, unlike other states, our Department of Corrections is under the Agency of Human Services, which I think says a lot about our state and our values, rather than the Department of Public Service. So all of that informed this work that was done in 2007 to really get people, to divert people into community justice programs, treatment programs, and so forth. And right now we've done really great work, but it is time to revisit that. So in May I've been attending the Joint Justice Oversight Committee meetings, and we've had 2 meetings so far, May and June, and we had the Council of State Governments and this is kind of a big deal. This is like getting the governor, getting the Chief Justice and the legislature to work together, and we're looking at some of the areas that are looking at our detention population, because there are some inherent problems there about why people are not leaving, and I think we want to, in the legislature, make data-driven decisions. And the other emphasis is about how are we reducing recidivism so that people go back into our communities and don't come back. So this is a process that has just started, and it'll take about 6 months. And we hope that it will inform a lot of the work that is also going on, looking at things like furlough, parole, you know, looking at healthcare, how we're delivering healthcare, and all of our programs. So it's a really, I think it's an exciting time. I think we can make some good interventions.
Yeah. Complications arise, and one of the complications that arose over the last year was the realization that the South Burlington facility was really old and no longer viable. So that started a process where we're looking at building another facility to replace that and maybe to do more. Can you share a little bit about?
Sure. So the South Burlington facility is the Chittenden Correctional Facility, which is the place that houses incarcerated women in Vermont. And serving on this committee, I've made it my business to visit some of the facilities. So I've been to the Chittenden facility, and with the Women's Caucus, we had an opportunity to have a forum with the women to get their insights. And also we've had a series of conversations with the Department of Corrections, the commissioner, many of his staff members, separate from that, employees who, state employees who work in our correctional facilities. The facility in South Burlington was never intended to be a facility that could. It was built as a temporary facility, a detention center, and so I've been in there, and what that means is that there are not the spaces for the healthcare needs and the programs that are needed to for people to successfully reintegrate into our communities. So we did put in the capital bill $250,000 to look at a planning, like to look at what our options are, because I don't know about your community in Putney, but many communities are not really interested in having a correctional facility in their backyard. So we need to do this on state land. It's a process, you know, it's a long process, and it's an expensive process. So what we're looking at, what that money, we want to be informed by the work that's being done with Justice Reinvestment, with the Council on State Government, so that we're building a facility that's informed by that process. And at the same time, we're trying to have a parallel path, because you know, what I've discovered, I knew this before serving on this committee because I've been involved with some capital projects, but wastewater systems are what drive so much of how we can develop and build in our communities. So much of it, we're looking at what might be some alternatives to what we know as a facility, whether it's in proximity to existing facilities and workforce. But you know, one of the things that came up that, you know, and I really want to assure people, you know, last legislative session there was the governor talked about having a private company, Core Civic, build a prison campus, and that's not what we're talking about here. Yeah. Core Civic is not on the table, and at the same time, Vermont government doesn't build prisons. There is you know, we have to be working with a private contractor. So this process is going to take 7 to 8 years, and it's going to be a deliberative and very careful process in what we do. And as much as I would love to say that we don't need prisons in Vermont, I think that's not our reality. Yeah. And we're seeing, I think I would like to get at some of the root causes of what's driving. You know, we are seeing an increase in our women's population, and we did a lot of deep diving in the data this session in my committee, and women are not in there on small, minor charges. No. They're more serious, they're more violent, and I want to get at, you know, what is driving this. So that's the larger issue that I think many of us, whether you serve on human services and healthcare, you know, what are the drivers to this? Yeah. We're seeing how the opioid epidemic is affecting our local communities. We're also seeing how that's impacting in corrections. And so we know that we need facilities where we can treat people for addiction. So I think we're taking all of those things into mind, and my core belief is that we want people to go out better than they came in. Yeah. And so I'm going to really do all I can do to pull that, to promote that agenda. Yeah. Well, it's heartening to hear that
the kind of intention you bring into this. I know many people are concerned. There's some old information perhaps that gets out there that we still have people in jail for writing bad checks or smoking pot, and that's not the case at all. And you know, we have some graphics which can show the population that we have, the graphics of how the population has actually declined. And the reality is that one of the considerations I think we're looking at is that because we have some people out of state, if we build a facility, we want to bring those people back home.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And underlying, I know several years ago we did a lot of work around the effects of trauma on and right across the board. When you look at the problems our society is having, often the root cause is trauma that hasn't been either diagnosed or treated, and then how violence begets violence. And we are seeing more. The people who are in jail are in there because they're violent. And we take public safety very seriously here in Vermont, and we want to make sure people know that Vermont's the safest state. We want to keep it that way. At the same time, we want to be compassionate and help people when we can. So this whole justice reinvestment process is impressive. So thank you for sharing that part of what we're trying to do here in Vermont.
It is the long view for sure, but I feel that there are a lot of people in both the House and the Senate that really are working towards this, because we need to work on many things like sentencing. You know, what is, you know, at the beginning, you know, sometimes we call this, we're the back door in corrections, and we do need to be mindful of what are the programs, that how are we delivering these programs? What are the, you know, use some of that results-based accountability. How are we doing? And you know, the Community High School of Vermont, you know, but there's a lot of work that can be done. And one of the, I know that we often look at, what my biggest realization in my committee was to see the overlap between our mental health system and our corrections and judicial system, like the how they interact. And I have to say, because I have not worked in social services, it's been the steepest learning curve to understand, you know, Woodside, which is our facility for youth offenders, and what we need to do there, but also the need that there is a need for treatment, and how we approach that in our state, and how interwoven they are, you know.
On public radio today, your chair, Representative Emmons, was quoted talking about this challenge and reminding people that one of the places where we still need to bolster the system is in our mental health care system.
Absolutely.
And when people fall through the cracks, they often land in corrections.
Yeah. And I feel the other piece of that is there is this thing, I know you're familiar with this, is the school to prison pipeline. Yeah. And really, the way I see it, you know, $60,000 is that's tuition to a really wonderful college or university, right? Which is the cost of what annual cost to be in corrections. And you know, can we make these investments earlier? Which is you know, making earlier interventions. You know, ensuring that our public schools are as strong as they can be, and you know, doing the community justice work in schools.
One of the things that's come up around there is how. The movie Coming Home highlights that, the reality of how COSAs help. And we were talking today in another realm how perhaps in child protection systems, individuals that have no family system to help them would be helped by a COSA, a circle of support and accountability, basically a support group. And that where men coming out of prison, I think it's primarily men, who have a COSA, the recidivism rate is only 20%, whereas without that, it's around 80%. Yeah. So there's one something that we could utilize across the board.
We could strengthen that. You know, we could strengthen that, and you know, as you know, many of the decisions that we make come down to money.
Yeah.
And, we did reduce, there has been pressure on the budget for the Department of Corrections, which is the funding stream for our community justice centers as well. And some of that funding was cut, which I feel great umbrage at that, because I feel if we really want to be changing the system, the whole point of justice reinvestment was reinvesting that money, and strengthening that system. We have some real, considering, I've been making a point of going and being part of some of the community conversations around the opioid epidemic, and there were in our communities, and there was a fantastic forum recently in Brattleboro at the Brattleboro Fire Station. I mean, it was beyond packed. I mean, you could not get in, and the amount, the range, and the different people who were there gives me hope. And I'm optimism, that because I think that a lot of this is about what COSAs are. It's about relationships and connections.
You bet.
And so there are legislative solutions and there are community solutions. Yeah. And it's really important to weave them together.
Yeah. When Peter Shumlin was governor, he tried to put forward the problem of opioids in a way that no one else in the country has done, and we put together the hub and spoke treatment system under Governor Shumlin, and he deserves credit for what he did there. And the idea is to help people better understand, and I think that work is starting to show up now in seeing people interested in these formats and understanding, as he said then, this is not a problem we can arrest our way out of.
No, and that's what we heard that again loud and clear. We cannot arrest our way out of this problem. And what was really heartening to me is that there were people there who are struggling with it, with substance use disorder, who were there, and it was to me, that was really says a lot about our community, and and says a lot. We see how this affects our schools, the family units. We have with the DCF, children being taken away from their parents. We need systems of addressing that, and I feel like that work is being done, and I see the effects of it, because our incarceration rates haven't gone up, and I think that in spite of the fact that we are living in a crisis with this and so there's going to be a lot more research that needs to be done, and I really do want to get at some of what are the root causes of why we're seeing the increases in women, and women being incarcerated.
Well, we have one committee assignment. We have to be on top of whatever's happening when it comes time to vote, and that's where our team helps each other. There's a number of other things that are very important in our communities, and broadband is something you have been working on, or broadband expansion, or where there is no broadband, initiating broadband. Share a little bit about what you've been working on. And
Sure. Well, this was, because so much of the work that we do as legislators is both up at the State House, but also in our communities, and it's the work that we're doing with our constituents. And so when I was out knocking on doors last summer, I mean, I knew intuitively, what I knew from my own experience, that internet and cell service was an issue, but I heard it loud and clear. And really, I think we all know that access to affordable internet is good for our students, as they're increasingly needing to rely on their Chromebooks and connecting to the internet. Our seniors who are going to be increasingly using telemedicine, small businesses, as we want to attract entrepreneurs working from home and small businesses. So, it was so terrific to see. I have to credit Laura Sibilia, the representative from Dover, who really spearheaded this effort in the House as the vice chair of House Energy and Technology, and Senator Becca Balint in the Senate. And, we know that rural broadband there have been so many initiatives, and in my district, I don't know yours, people are angry, because we've seen different kinds of investment go in, and they've heard it before. And so what we did with broadband, I think this session is exciting. It is about giving funding and really making it possible for communities, municipalities to work together to what I hope will evolve into a model that is modeled after the EC Fiber model,
Right.
which is in central Vermont, which they formed a communications union district, which were municipalities coming together to install fiber.
Yeah. They've created their own utility.
Yeah, so this is exactly, it's a public utility that's owned by the people, and it requires investment and requires some technical expertise.
Yeah.
And as Laura says, no one's coming to save us.
Yeah.
This is going to have to be community driven solution. So
Yeah.
the part of the bill also included hiring the creation of a new position at the Public Service Board to work with this. So the hire is happening over the summer. And as legislators, a few of us who are, I know your community in Putney and Westminster and in Dummerston, there are areas that are in need of internet and cell service. So how can we, as legislators, help support and guide our communities to create a regional solution? So a couple of us got together with Chris Campany at our community at Windham Regional Commission, it's our community development organization, and Adam Grinold at our economic development division. And how can we work together? So we're going to be putting together some more forums. I know some folks have participated in these connectivity summits that Southeastern Vermont Economic Development Strategies group has put together, but we're going to be doing something in early September. And I'm going to give out an email address, and I'll say it slowly. So if folks want to be in the loop, we'll be doing some things in the press, but they can also send an email to severmontbroadband@gmail.com. So SE, like Southeastern Vermont Broadband @gmail.com.
Yep.
And that's the Windham Regional Commission, who's going to be, collecting names and helping share information. And the idea is that we're really looking at a way to put out some really clear models for how people how towns can work together. And an important part of this is keeping our eye on the ball of what's going on at the federal level, as you know. And Congressman Welsh was in Brattleboro recently, and we were talking with him about this, because we really have to make sure that the cable companies do not make it impossible for the formation of these publicly owned utilities. And I feel like this is really a lifeline, because we know Southern Vermont is the greatest part of Vermont to live in and work in. And getting our rural broadband up to 21st century speed is so key. Yeah. So that's something that I think we saw how it had tripartisan support in the House and from the governor, which was good to see. And this is not the end. We're going to have to keep the pressure up, keep people connected, and working on it. So we will need smart, committed community volunteers to be part of this. There'll be grant funding and loans, and we'll need to make some investment. So it's exciting.
Well, we're about out of time.
Yeah.
But it's not too soon, even though we've just finished this session, to start thinking about next session. So if people want to get in touch with you, what's the best way to do that?
So I have 2 emails that people can use from my legislature. It's my legislative email, which is scoffey@leg.state.vt.us. Facebook, I have an active Facebook presence, and can call me on my home phone number, which is 802-257-0288. The issues that I'm really focusing on are our rural economy, education, broadband, and clean water, are and along with the criminal justice reforms that we were talking about. So if folks are interested in those issues or care about those issues, I hope they'll reach out to me.
You bet. Well, thanks so much for taking the time today.
Thanks, Mike. It's really great talking with you and serving with you.
You bet. Well, thank you. And thanks to the people at BCTV again for helping us inform you about the work that we're doing in Montpelier. And we want to make sure that BCTV knows that we support them, and hope you do too. So until next time, this is Mike Mrowicki. Bye-bye now.